Showtime! The Capital G Show starts right now.
Who really wants to spend tons of money to play Yu-Gi-Oh competitively in 2019 anyways? Our game can be uber expensive, that's nothing new, and a lot of meta decks use very pricey cards like Infinite Impermanence, Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion, Broil Sword Dragon, Sky Striker, and Thunder Dragon cards, etc., cards that not everyone in the community has a budget for. And although that some of those cards are getting reprinted and the new set Dual Power, we now find ourselves in a very strange situation where we won't have access to those reprints for the next 2 months, this format essentially, and they don't really help us now. But don't worry, if you still want to play Yu-Gi-Oh competitively without breaking the bank, these can definitely be the answer. In this video, I'll be giving you my picks for the best budget-friendly decks that you can play and have legitimate amounts of success against anything in the meta. I'll be sticking to a strict budget of $100 for the entire main and extra deck, so if your deck needs $50 or $60 cards, you can expect it not to make the cut. As much as this pains me, I did have to omit Cyber Dragons because I feel that Galaxy Soldier and Evenly Match are pretty much vital to the best builds of the deck, and that wouldn't allow us to keep it under $100. I'll also be leaving out any decks that I talked about on my top 5 best decks of the format list. With all that out of the way, welcome to the top 5 best budget decks for the February and March 2019 formats, the Yu-Gi-Oh hierarchy. Number 5, Tai, True Draco, and Lunalight. When it comes to True Draco, this deck actually got a scary little buff that most people in the community aren't thinking about. While Domain Monarchs aren't quite ready for prime time in my opinion, the Monarch Stormforth can actually shine in this format, and that's in the True Draco deck. One of the reasons True Draco struggles so much with the Thunder Dragon matchup is they just don't have enough easy answers to dealing with a Colossus that's already on the field. Now they definitely do. You can just activate Stormforth and tribute that baby away, not actually having to worry about destroying it or it activating its effect. People tend to forget that this deck still has access to insanely powerful floodgate cards like the Monarch's Erupt, Skill Drain, and Inspector Border, just to name a few, and this is one of the only meta-worthy decks that can easily incorporate triple card of Demise, which it's a draw 3, low-key, still kind of a broken card. Draco players can also run Imperial Iron Wall to dodge things like Evenly Match, and then they can actually tribute it for a monster or pop it with Diagram later in the following turns to make sure that it's not a dead card after their opponent has whipped on that Evenly Match. Lastly, I feel like a lot of people right now are not running Droll and Lockbird, so there's pretty good odds that all the drawing and searching you're doing turn 1 is actually going to go through. Believe it or not, Lunalight recently made a top 8 regional finish thanks to the new support added to the archetype from the legendary Duelist Sisters of the Rose set. With the new additions to the deck, such as Lunalight Serenade Dance and especially Lunalight Yellow Martin, the deck has gotten so much better than ever before. While the deck still has its ability to pull off Leo Dancer OTKs as it was always known for, Yellow Martin adds a completely new dimension to the deck. In combination with Lunalight Tiger, which reborns one of your double L monsters from the graveyard with her pendulum effect, Lunalights now get turns where they have tons of fodder for Exceed plays and Link Climbing. Link Climbing was never that attractive to the archetype because it generally came at the cost of the deck's fusion fodder, and there were no mid-level Link monsters that would naturally pay you back for your investment. That was until the release of the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardique. Since Lunalights are primarily dark-based as an archetype, they can easily make Rusty Bardique and then go for Azathoth plays to lock down your opponent. Locking your opponent out of monster effects for an entire turn is something that this archetype would have never been able to dream about 6 months ago. Going back to the fusion side of the deck, Leo Dancer is almost tailor-made to destroy meta decks. She can't be targeted or destroyed by opponent's card effects in any way, so commonly used defensive measures like Widow Anchor, Altergeist Sequidius, Solemn Strike, and Prank Kids Battle Butler are completely useless to stop her. One of the main outs people use are the Boral Link monsters, but you gotta keep in mind neither one of those cards can target her, and they need to be made after she's actually summoned. That is, of course, if you actually live to see that following turn. Number 4, Paleozoic Frogs. For everyone who complained about floodgates after Altergeist won YCS Sydney, have you forgotten that Paleo have been doing that for ages? This deck can main deck Anti-Spell, Fragrance, Mistake, Rivalry of Warlords, and Gozen Match, even more floodgates than Altergeist. It also greatly benefits from powerful dual-use utility cards such as Breakthrough Skill and Lost Wind that are absolutely excellent in this format. These cards can not only destroy the Sky Striker and Thunder Dragon matchups, as you're easily able to stop 2 extra deck monsters monsters for a single card, but in the case of Lost Wind, 2 activations means 2 paleo monsters being summoned from your graveyard, so that's an instant totally awesome if those monsters live throughout the turns. In addition to all the trap disruption, as I mentioned in my other video, totally awesome is still a pain in the butt to deal with, and unlike Prank Kids, paleo players will generally tribute other monsters rather than the toad itself, so don't look for Called by the Grave to actually be an easy counter to the card. Paleo has always been a control player's dream for ages, and it's still an incredibly good deck. Number 3, Crusade. I used to think of Crusade as a big-time OTK deck that could only go second, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, but with the addition of the Guard Dragons from Savage Strike, the deck can actually go first and make boards with triple disruption very similar to Pendulum Magicians. This is generally done with the addition of the Baby Chaos Dragon engine, which serves as excellent synchro fodder for cards like F.A. Don Dragster. In addition, the Chaos Dragons are really good when it comes to making the Guard Dragon Link monsters themselves. This, of course, does not mean that Crusadia cannot still go second, and now with no Gumblar, Rongo, or Soul Charge, going second just got a heck of a lot easier and better. But in addition to that, Crusadia now have 3 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber to play around with if they so choose, so not only can this deck go first now, but it inherently got better at doing what it has always done. Number 2, Subterra Guru Control. At this point, you might as well classify this as a brand new deck, considering it functions very differently than basic Subterrors. Guru turns this archetype into a viable meta threat. Not only does it have a built-in Rhoda with its flip effect, which combined with the Hidden City can actually be used turn 0, but Guru has a built-in disruption effect as well by way of his Book of Moon effect that stops your opponent from attacking or being able to possibly use a monster from the extra deck. This guy is a true dual threat, and being able to search an Infernity Barrier hand trap gives your board the necessary protection against things like Evenly Match. Subterra Cave Clash was always a card with great potential, but now with Guru it can really shine. It's only a one-of in the deck, but it gives you the ability to recycle your Fiendish for multiple negations, and it makes the damage that you do with Subterra Final Battle much more significant. This deck doesn't rely on the extra deck at all, and even though Pot of Extravagance is a little too extravagant for a budget deck, it does give you the option to run Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, considering you have as much space as you want to put cards from your opponent's deck in there. Since Guru Control barely ever special summons, it does leave you the option of running a very powerful but seldomly used Floodgates in summon limits. This card absolutely trashes any combo deck, and it generally makes it that your opponent can't even out a board of Guru plus another Subterra card, considering all the disruption that Guru has built into it. This is a deck that's definitely on the come up. My honorable mentions are Time Thieves and Pendulum Magicians. I know that it's a little early to start talking about the Time Thief deck from a competitive standpoint, but I don't believe it's too early. Sure, the archetype only has 3 main deck monsters, but one of them is a Stratos for the entire theme, and another one is a Rescue Rabbit, so you can tell that they're definitely starting off on the right foot. 2 of these 3 monsters, keep in mind, can be summoned from the graveyard for free, and the Exceed Boss monster is simply fantastic as well, with his ability to dodge targeting effects, and he has built-in disruption that can be used during your opponent's turn. I understand that the archetype by itself is not enough to make a standalone deck right now. It simply doesn't have enough cards, but thanks to its very forgiving makeup, being level 4 and dark base, it means that you have innate synergy with archetypes such as Phantom Knights, Performages, Dangers, and even Zodiac. In fact, there are a lot of 2-card combos that can net you a Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardique, Outer Entity Azathoth, and a copy of Time Thief Redoer all on the field turn 1. Our TCG exclusive archetypes over the past few years feel like they've been completely hit or miss, but Time Thieves are off to an amazing start, and I think that they're a hit. When it comes to Pendulum Magicians, we know that this deck is incredibly impressive when it comes to front running, and it can really snowball the game turn 1 when it gets to start off a duel. We've seen Tripp's game plan in the field of multiple negations Pendulums can make. Them being able to go on the Rusty Bardique easily thanks to Underclock Taker is something that also adds a lot more disruption to their arsenal, and if you play a couple of Zephyr cards, you get access to a turn 1 Infernity Barrier in the way of Zephyr Divine Strike, which can really fortify your boards and make them near unbreakable. However, this deck does struggle mightily when it has to play second against established boards, especially if the opponent is very wise and decides to use their disruption specifically on Heavy Metaphor's Electromite. It can feel like a serious uphill battle, and sometimes you can just auto lose if your opponent uses disruption, for instance turn 0 on an Electromite. I'm looking at you, Cyframe Gear Gamma, and Ghost Ogre. And finally, to our number 1, Trickstar. Trickstars seem like old reliable at this point, viable since their release in Code of the Duelist, and still making top cut at YCSs as recently as our last YCS in Sydney. Because the core engine of Trickstar monsters is so relatively small, the deck's ability to evolve and adapt is really just rivaled by Burning Abyss at this point. While the deck did lose a powerful copy of Scapegoat, it also gained access to Trickstar Carabane for pure versions, and Trickstar can easily main deck a lot of the good monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! That other decks tend to keep in their sideboards. Things like Cyber Dragon, Dino Wrestler, Prankatribes, Droll and Lockbird, Eater of Millions, and even more powerful cards that I haven't mentioned. This deck also has access to the dreaded Reincarnation plus Droll and Lockbird combo that can be nearly impossible to come back from, and it can be incredibly difficult to play around if your deck actually does a lot of searching. Even for players who set a lot of their spells and traps first, Trickstars can use cards like Heavy Storm Duster to punish that as well. So at this point, I just feel like I'm tired of doubting this deck and getting burned for it, only to see it top another YCS in the future, so I'm just gonna buy stock from the beginning. Well, that's my list, and I want you guys to let me know how I did in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos. This video has been brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/MegaCapitalG. Over 180,000 titles to choose from on your Apple or Android device. Cancel anytime with no obligations. I'm listening to The Amazing Wrestling for My Life by Shawn Michaels. Link in the description.